Hi, this is Arun Bhaskar from Bhaskar Ki Business Bate, more specifically BKBB. We have every week a program on policy analysis and stories or conversations. And every morning we have this show which is on news behind the news. And thank you for joining us. Three requests. Please click the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Hit the like button. It helps us know what stories to talk about more often. And the third one, which is crucial, tell all your friends about us. We are doing things that many people don't do, and we'd like more people to know about it. And there's one more reminder. At the end of the show, we try to respond to questions. Put in your questions, your observations, your comments in the chat box. We'll have a look at it. We'll take a couple of them for review and for commentaries. Today we have a very unusual set of stories, many of them dealing with the auto sector directly or indirectly. But first, let me tell you who my co-anchors are. I have with me Katya. Welcome, Katya. Good to see you. We have Isha. Welcome, Isha. And we have Anurag. Good to see you. And the four of us are going to talk about some very unusual headlines. Just look at the headlines we're going to cover. The first is about jobs, and it goes back to Steve Jobs of Apple, who said there are some jobs that USA cannot do. And the second one is on how India's balance of trade is worsening. The third is basically on how the entire market for how the balance of trade of India is slipping badly. And the fourth one is how India is reacting to EVs, to electric vehicles. And each one of the anchors is going to talk about one or the other story. Let's come to the first story that I'm going to do. It takes off on a report that Economic Times came up with yesterday, which quoted Steve Jobs and said there are some jobs that will not be there in America when manufacturing Apple phones. He was talking about the quality and he was talking about the price. There's a price point at which manufacturing becomes possible. And there's a quality that require that is also important. And Steve Jobs was very clear these jobs cannot be done in America, and he took them outside America to China and to Taiwan and to every other country where he had an advantage. Why am I giving the story? For another reason. Yesterday there was a meeting of all the EU trade representatives, and they were talking about about Trump's tariffs. The US was trying to tell them not to have retaliatory tariffs. And the EU said, you remove all your tariffs, we remove all our tariffs. And US was unwilling. Automobiles, if you remember, has been targeted with a 25% tariff. The meeting ended with no resolution on the subject. And please remember that USA is very, very, very sensitive to automobiles because as the chart shows, many of the cars in America are available from Canada or from Mexico. You put in tariffs, your cars will not be available. And as you pointed out some time ago, America specializes in making large cars. All the small cars are imported. And when you hurt the large number of small and medium customers, you are going to have a kind of a political upheaval, a social upheaval in the markets. But then coming back again to the same situation, as Steve Jobs said, there are some jobs that will not come back to America, and that's something that Trump has not understood. When you have tariffs on one hand and you have abandoned immigration on the other, you don't allow low-cost labor into your country, and you have high costs of imports and a high cost of manufacturing, the country is going to slip into a quagmire that Trump hasn't reckoned with. And that takes me to the second story, and the second story is on trade deficit. Could we have Isha coming in with her story?
Hello, good morning. The story I'm bringing you today is from the Hindu Business Line and it's titled Flat Exports, High Imports, Widen Trade Deficit to 21.54 billion in March. As of March 2025, the country's trade deficit has widened significantly to 21.54 billion compared with 15.34 billion in March 2024, with imports surging 11.4% to 63.51 billion US dollars and exports rising a meager 0.7%. Geopolitical tensions and global uncertainties have kept the exports almost flat. Trade deficit in the financial year 25 increased to 282.82 billion compared with 241.14 billion in the previous fiscal year. While this already paints a bleak picture, some analysts say that these figures are better than expected as exporters were in a hurry to send large shipments out before the Trump tariffs came into effect in April. The chief economist of ICRA, Aditi Nair, now anticipates a current account surplus of 1 to 3 billion US dollars, which would mean a deficit of around 0.9% through the year. Sunil Bhartwal, the Commerce Secretary, however, has a more optimistic view, stating that India has done better than most countries given the circumstances, and he highlights how non petroleum exports are at the highest ever. India's overall exports of goods and services are estimated to hit a record 820.93 billion US dollars in the financial year 2024-25, which is an increase of 5.5% as compared to 2023-24. However, the final numbers will only be known once the RBI shares the official service export numbers. US continues to be India's number one export destination, followed by UAE. UK, China, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, Germany, and Australia are also amongst the top 10. Amongst importers, China remains India's number one importer with shipments totaling 113.46 billion US dollars, which is then followed by Russia and then UAE. As the global geopolitical situation continues to remain extremely volatile and uncertain, let's see how India's trade relations evolve. That's all from my side. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story, sir.
Thank you, Isha. A very, very important story because trade deficit increased the way we expected it to last year. But contrary to the optimists, I think the trade deficit will increase even further because of two reasons. One is the tariffs that the US has imposed, even though mobile phones have been taken out of the tariffs. The rest of the goods, if the tariffs are imposed, even the 10% minimum tariff, you will find India's cost going up. Cost of imports will shoot up. And so is the cost of exports. Point two, with the tariffs coming in, you'll find exports becoming a little more difficult, so exports will fall. So imports will become expensive, exports will fall, expect the trade deficit to increase, and our manufacturing is already slowing down unless India does something quickly. That could be a problem later. Let's see. But now, linked to the balance of trade is a third bit of news, and that is on oil. Katya, could we have your story?
So FY24 had a very interesting set of fuel consumption patterns. So one, diesel sales have not grown only 2% in FY25, and this was at 4.3% in FY24. And the reason, in very another interesting part about that is it's the slowest growth we've seen in FY25 since the pandemic. Pandemic was when everything was shut down. So see, the demand softness in diesel also indicates a bit of slowdown. Some of it might have had an impact, but there is also a structural story behind it. Electronic vehicles are taking off, and this shift is starting to show on the balance of play. You know the promise that they made to us that once we go EVs, we will improve. Our import bill is going to change. I think that is starting to have an impact. So mostly, if you look at a lot of metros, if you travel metros, Bombay and Delhi, most of the buses have already shifted to electric vehicles. And then there is another interesting set of things is happening because of new age companies. A lot of e-com players, be it Flipkart, Amazon, all their deliveries. Their fleets have been converted into electric vehicles, probably because of their sustainability ideas, etc., sustainability goals that they've set for themselves. But that is also having an impact, because if you see, diesel is mostly used for in the logistics sector, for LCV demand in transport of goods across. Petrol is mostly used for cars and other passenger vehicles. That is also, this logistics part of the business seems to have hit and interestingly, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, e-rickshaws have taken off in a really big way. Actually, even before auto sales recovered in across India in terms of passenger vehicles, e-rickshaws were doing really, really well in terms of sales. So that is some structural shift. So, but we do not know how much of this impact is also because of a possible slowdown, which is very obvious right now. Back to you, sir.
Yeah. And linked to your EV story is yet another EV story, which is why I reserve the comments on the EV sector till after the next story. And that's Anurag's story. Anurag, can we have you?
Good morning. The enthusiasm that the Indian auto industry and the government have for the EV growth is not at par with the consumer expectations. The 2025 Global Automotive Consumer Study by Deloitte suggests that Indian EV customers are less interested in buying electric vehicles than in 2024. The study shows a strong rise in interest for internal combustion engine ICE vehicles, with 54% of customers choosing traditional fuel powered cars as their next choice compared to 49% in 2024. Indian consumers rank product quality and safety as top priorities when purchasing vehicles, with 62% placing these factors above price considerations, according to the study. The report highlights a significant openness to share personal data, with 88% willing to provide identifiable information to manufacturers or third parties for features like anti-theft tracking, which is even higher than 60% willingness observed in the United States, which also demonstrates a greater trust in data-driven mobility solutions among the Indian consumers. But the real concern for the EV growth in India are overpricing, driving range, and lack of adequate charging infrastructure, which the customers from purchasing electric vehicles going ahead. However, the overall EV sales has increased by 17% as compared to the to 2024 sales. But it is observed that the Indian consumers choose EVs as their secondary vehicles, as the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, as Katya has also mentioned that the rural areas have increased in the sales of three-wheelers and EV auto rickshaws, which also drives the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers drive 95% of the total EV sales in India. The government push for electrification through policies like FAME, faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicle scheme, and production linked incentives does not show promise of the actual on ground reality of EV growth. What's your take on this, sir?
Absolutely, EVs are going to be a very interesting market in India. Tesla and BYD are waiting in the wings. Will they expand the market? Nobody knows. And what Katya says is true, that with EVs coming in, India's import will may reduce, and possibly our trade deficit will also reduce. But let us see what happens. And we have reached, in a way, the end of a time. But thank you for being with us. I can see several questions, one on the balance of trade and the second on Trump's tariffs. Let me combine them and just give only one answer. Trump's tariffs are in a moment of transition. The kind of shock that he got on the bonds market has put him on the back foot, and he has given 90-day window within which all the tariffs will be reviewed. I think some sanity will prevail somewhere, and maybe there's hope for everybody. But more on this channel later as events develop. Thank you for being with us, and do remember subscribe button, the like button, and please tell your friends about us. Have a wonderful day, and thank you once again.